When the railways began to spread more than 200 years ago, their impact on architecture was nothing short of revolutionary. To serve these marvellous machines, whole new kinds of buildings sprang up. From the outlandishly ornate...
The things you find on buildings.
...to hidden gems.
I never thought I'd get to see this.
And railway wonders of the world.
Now, this is what I call extreme train spotting.
Now, with privileged access.
We are swinging.
Oh, my goodness.
And rarely seen designs.
Oh, this is the famous watercolour.
I want to show you how each and every one of these remarkable structures tells the story of how the railways have changed the way we live.
You're standing in the middle of history.
Forever. Today, I'll find out how some quirky railway architecture shaped an entire city.
It's been named the Bridge of Mordor, Stegosaurus.
I like the Stegosaurus one. That feels about right to me.
In the Network Rail archives, we'll reveal the legacy of a founding father of Victorian railways.
This bridge burnt down in 1970 and they rebuilt it using Stephenson's masonry to be a road and rail bridge.
And we'll get an exclusive look at a brutalist signal box just before its lights are switched off for the very last time.
It's a bit of a blast from the past up here, isn't it? And it's going to be replaced by new technology, and you won't see this again.
Climb aboard as I explore the architecture the railways built. For over 2 centuries, the railways and their accompanying architecture have been dramatically reshaping our relationship with our immediate surroundings and the world beyond, leaving indelible marks on the towns, cities and villages where we live and work. Nowhere is this more evident than in Lincoln, a vibrant cathedral city in one of the UK's largest counties. This ancient place, whose history stretches back to 300 BC, is home to England's oldest inland harbour and a world-class university. But my biggest interest in this historical gem is how its railway architecture shaped the very essence of this city. The decisions made by 2 opposing rail companies have determined how people were able to live their lives here. And any city where the railway is king is my kind of town.
Exiting the station now, I can feel already this is a station full of railway history waiting to be explored, because I can see here this is a building created from the local stone in its brick. And of course, look at that, towering all the way up to these magnificent, fantastic Tudor-style chimneys. There is so much just waiting to be explored here.
But my journey doesn't kick off here at what used to be known as Lincoln Central, because this is a tale of 2 stations, both grand, both very different, and with a rivalry that divided the city. We start down the road at what was once Lincoln St Mark's Station. Helping me shine a light on how this Victorian melodrama was played out in monumental architecture is local railway historian Alan Stennett.
Well, this is a very fine structure indeed, isn't it? These wonderful pilasters here and these columns on this side. Very fine indeed.
It really is quite remarkable.
This Grade 2 listed station opened in 1846 and was originally intended as a terminus for the Midland Railway. Now a shopping centre, the station building still retains its imposing portico. And what a structure it is!
This is almost Greek in a sense with the pillars, or classical architecture, which it's fairly unusual.
But why have, I suppose, something like this in Lincoln? Because I'm not seeing much else in Lincoln that looks like this at all.
It had to stand out because this was the arrival of the new mode of transport into Lincoln. The best you could do up to that stage, you might be a stagecoach or possibly just a wagon and horses. So here was the future arriving in Lincoln, and it really had to look good and look spectacular.
I think we often forget today just what an extraordinary portal these buildings really were, because this is the portal to the rest of the world for Lincoln, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is, for Lincoln at that time, what Heathrow Airport might be now, or even more so, Cape Canaveral perhaps. But, you know, it was something utterly new. The whole of Lincolnshire hadn't had it before. You know, it was a really massive chunk of the east of England that never had a pair of tracks laid through it in its life. And suddenly it was there, this amazing possibility to get away. So yes, it was really important to the city. And I think the company wanted to show that. They wanted to say, here is something fantastic that we, the Midland Railway, have brought to you people here in Lincoln, something you've never had before and something you will really find useful.
While this chunk of classical architecture might have been Lincoln's first station, it wasn't to be the last. In the 1840s, there was huge competition to build a direct line linking London to York. The Midland Railway hoped they had the monopoly on the Lincoln to London leg of the journey with their somewhat indirect route via Nottingham, a journey which took 8 hours in 1846. But the Great Northern Railway, ambitious as ever, had other ideas. And their station was Lincoln Central. Designed by architect John Henry Taylor and completed in 1848, this was the second station to open in Lincoln in as many years. And it was just down the high street from Lincoln St Mark's.
So the idea here is the Midland comes in first, gets the Lincoln traffic, takes you across to Nottingham and then on down to London to stop anyone else trying to do the same thing, get the passengers and the punters and the freight coming to them before anybody else had the chance.
Absolutely. It's a perfectly good idea. Didn't work. Great Northern decided, no, we were going to come through anyway, and decided that it had to have a separate station. It was assumed that anybody else who brought the line into Lincoln would use that same station. But the railways don't always do the sensible thing.
And this is why so many of our British cities have multiple railway stations. Competitive rail companies furiously vying for trade were reluctant to share buildings. And that's exactly what happened here almost 2 centuries ago.
This is just why I love railway architecture, because every building tells a story, doesn't it?
Yep, it certainly does.
Now, this is a rather lovely station to look at, I have to say. In fact, one of the architectural experts of the 20th century suggested it's one of the best buildings of Lincoln, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Pevsner referred to it as baronial. I assume he's talking about the chimneys and the turrets and the bits of castellation and the rather fine canopy over the front of it here.
Despite being built just 2 years apart, the architecture of these stations couldn't be more different. The pillars of St Mark's are proudly classical in style, while Lincoln Central's tall chimneys and mullion windows got their inspiration elsewhere.
This is a Victorian railway station, as far as I know, but it looks rather, shall I say, Tudor. Why is that?
Well, very much Victorian, opened in 1848. Lincoln, I think, felt it needed something really solid and historic, and that's basically what the railway company provided.
It's fair to say some Victorians were obsessed with the Tudors. They were heroes representing everything many Victorians wanted to be. A proud Protestant naval power with a global empire. It's possible the decision to include such strong Tudor revival features here stemmed from hard-nosed business ambition.
I have a bit of a theory, which is there to say, actually, this is here to lure people away from the classical-style Midland station down the road, to something quite different, that's a little bit more ornate, perhaps, and rather more appropriate for this city of a cathedral and castle.
Yes, it possibly did. I think both stations, most companies, that the Midland for St Mark's and the Great Northern for this one, felt they really had to push the boat out a little bit on the station.
The Midland Railway's hopes of quashing the demand for a direct link to London were dashed in 1850 when the Great Northern's route opened. Within a year, they'd halved the journey time to 4 hours. Now, on a comparatively minor branch line, St Mark's was unable to compete with the convenience of Central Station, and it finally closed in 1985. all traffic was diverted into what is now just known as Lincoln Station. And although the rivalry between those two railway companies has long been settled, I'll find out it's left some indelible marks on modern-day Lincoln.
That was almost less than a minute, I think, that barrier was up, before this one came down again.
I'm in Lincoln with historian Alan Stennett. I've been learning how, in the 1800s, the Midland and Great Northern Railways went head-to-head, each with their own separate railway lines and distinctly separate stations. This is Lincoln Station, the one that won the battle. It's Victorian in period, but built in a Tudor style, and I'm itching to go back through its castle-like arch and have a closer look at the interior.
Oh, look at this! Didn't expect this roof. It's coffered ceiling. And there's all the lovely sort of ornate flowers as well, and leaves alongside. Isn't it lovely?
Yeah, brilliant stuff, certainly. Yeah.
This is undoubtedly a fine station, built to last, still with many original features. But it used to be even more spectacular.
Back in the old days, there were canopies over each of the first tracks here. There were cast iron, there were filigree sides, but it all disappeared sometime in the 1950s and was replaced by this sort of rather more corporate look, shall we say.
Oh, yeah. Well, perhaps now we have a better idea of how to preserve and conserve our railway architecture. Tell you what, though, I do love these two towers for the lifts, which make the whole station more accessible for everybody in today's modern world. And look, I guess actually mirroring the old baronial style of those two turrets either side as well.
Absolutely. Same brick, same kind of roof, and you've got that essential service for the public. But at the same time, it matches and everything is right. You know, perhaps a pity they didn't do something more on the canopies, but that's the way these things go.
It's joyous to see this station's new architectural elements reflecting the grandeur of its history. What could be more fitting? But the ornate iron canopies are not the only thing lost to the sands of time. I can also see evidence of a softening of the old rivalry on which this station was built.
Over here, I can see the GNR badge hanging up, and yet over here, its great rival. I can see the war memorial on the side over here, but not for this station.
No, it was moved here when St Mark's was closed because, you know, railway people, yes, we talked before, they are terrible rivals, but they also have that feeling of community.
What a lovely way of uniting, finally, at last, the railway history of this great city.
Absolutely.
There was less harmony when it came to laying the tracks, though, with the Midland and Great Northern both having separate lines. And that still impacts the city of Lincoln to this day.
Suddenly, you had two level crossings, what, a few hundred yards at most apart. And the Board of Trade could have insisted on one level crossing, but for some unknown reason didn't. And that was why we end up with two here in Lincoln for most of the history of Lincoln.
And that is why the city looks like it does today, of course.
Yes.
Because of the railway company.
That's right, yes.
I think I need a closer look.
In the past, I've asked myself, who doesn't love a level crossing? Well, the answer is everybody in Lincoln, because frankly, it interrupts their life many, many times a day. This is the infamous level crossing gates of the High Street level crossing in the middle of Lincoln. In fact, here comes a train now. Now, it's infamous because when I say High Street, it really is the High Street. Now, I reckon we've got about 1 or 2 minutes to get across this before the barriers come down again, because right here is Lincoln Central Station. And there's another 3 trains timetabled over the next 10 minutes. That's an incredible barrier to any town, let alone a busy high street.
If it feels like a never-ending procession of trains, that's because it is. These gates rise and fall a staggering 202 times on average each day.
Good grief. Well, I said any minute now, and I really did mean any minute now. That was almost less than a minute, I think, that barrier was up. Well, this one came down again. So there's a train now over there on platform 4, ready to come out to go off to Leeds down there. I mean, this comes down so frequently. It's incredible.
But where once multiple level crossings separated the city, causing chaos as locomotives formed moving barriers, now new railway structures are enhancing Lincoln's way of life.
To get around it, they have put in place this rather fab, rather sturdy-looking new footbridge, which is rather neat, actually.
With a population of over 100,000 people, that's got to be a good thing. And you know me, if there's a railway building, I'm going up it.
What a fabulous view you get from up here. It's a grandstand view of the whole of Lincoln Station. Look at this, you've got the signal box down here as well. A lovely Great Northern Railway original. Grade 2 listed, I'll have you know. What's lovely about this bridge, of course, is the fact it's glass on the side. But it means that everyone can enjoy a bit of healthy train spotting. Problem is, I didn't get the number from this angle. Oh well, next time.
If fellow train spotters need another ground-level vantage point, a quick peek along the tracks reveals another opportunity.
Lucky old Lincoln hasn't got just one level crossing in the city centre, it's got two. Now, this one is the far end of the city, down at the university campus. Now, just like the one in the city centre on the High Street, this one also has a rather funky footbridge to enable access when those gates are shut. And it's rather striking design, this one.
Bestriding the tracks like a spiky-spined dinosaur, this magnificently modern crossing and the renovated university buildings that it leads to were created by architect Nigel Stevenson.
Now tell me, what do local people think of this footbridge? Do you know?
It's been named the Bridge of Mordor, Stegosaurus.
I like the Stegosaurus one, that feels about right to me.
The actual inspiration came from being younger on railway bridges, but not being able to see the trains come underneath. So the idea was to take a traditional form, deconstruct it, make it transparent, so it's got the traditional elements, but in a much more modern way.
Do you know, I love that, because when I was very small, I used to stand on Beaconsfield footbridge. I stand there, and my granny had to just hoik me up so I could wave down the train. But here, you can stand there and wave at the train.
And that came from a sort of boyhood fascination about looking down on trains.
The design may hail from misty-eyed railway memories, but the bridge is vital for the future of this city. When the University of Lincoln established this new campus in 1996, it became clear the increased footfall of 15,000 students required better access than just the level crossing. So, from 2019, this finely finned footbridge has provided that fast and safe passage.
Standing on this open bridge here, actually, I can see two further footbridges, one down there by the High Street and one there on the station, but all looking quite different. Why is that?
Well, we were involved in the first bridge on High Street over there. Well, that was a very different design because the planning department wanted a much more traditional-looking bridge that was more classical in its form. So it actually fit better in with High Street because that is a conservation area, whereas this one isn't.
I think it reflects the university very well indeed.
Very much so. The design ethos was about reflecting a much more modern, vibrant campus.
Yeah. What's it like standing here on your work and watching other people use it?
It makes us very proud, to be honest, especially with this bridge. Really thank the City and Network Rail for allowing a more expressive bridge to happen.
This is just the latest example of bold railway architecture that has helped to make Lincoln the city it is today. Bridges, whether foot or rail, have always been one of the most visible signs of railways in our cities. And next, I'll be finding out about a pair of groundbreaking crossings designed by a railway legend.
So we've got here two bridges on either sides of the country being designed and built by the same engineer, looking very, very different. It's bizarre, isn't it?
I've been lucky enough to be given behind-the-scenes access to the architectural treasures of the Network Rail Archive in York. Archivist Vicky Stretch wants to show me some very special drawings from the collection. Plans of two contrasting bridges, both designed by none other than railway legend Robert Stephenson.
So these are some of my favourite drawings here in the archive, and we have two sets here, the High Level Bridge at Newcastle and the Britannia Bridge in North Wales. And what I really love about these two sets of drawings is that they are both by Robert Stephenson, miles and miles apart on different sides of the country.
Each of these bridges, designed by Stephenson, was a one-off, from the overall design to the tiniest detail.
These drawings are fantastic. The High Level Bridge at Newcastle was the first road and rail bridge in the world. The railway at the top and the roadway underneath.
Now, I know that because I stood on that bridge to do filming in January and looked down at the water a very long way below.
Very windy and very cold.
When it opened in 1849, the Newcastle High Level Bridge was a world's first in railway architecture. Getting to do a track walk on top of it was both wonderful and hair-raising in equal measure. But seeing this original architect's drawing for the very first time is giving me a whole new insight into this groundbreaking railway structure.
Can I touch it?
Of course you can. These are working drawings. This bridge was refurbished, and these drawings were used as part of that refurbishment.
As carriages have given way to motor vehicles and the trains got heavier, the bridge underwent 10 years of restoration and strengthening. And it's a joy to think that these beautiful plans could have been a crucial part of that process.
This is wonderful. This is really wonderful. Interesting. The ironwork is not included in this contract.
And here we have some detailed drawings of each of the different levels. So what we've got here is a plan of the railroad at the Newcastle end of the bridge. And it's unusual because railroad is a phrase that we associate with American railways, of course.
Well, here we have in black and white, in ink, of the Stephensons themselves calling it the rail.
It definitely says railroad.
But this wasn't the only bridge Stephenson was designing at the time.
What we have here are some drawings for the Britannia Bridge, which is in North Wales. Again, designed by Robert Stephenson, opened in 1850, but this is a tubular structure.
I love this. I mean, it's quite functional, this drawing, but I love the lions at the end, of course.
The lions are fantastic.
So we've got here two bridges on either sides of the country being designed and built by the same engineer, looking very, very different. It's bizarre, isn't it?
It is, but if you look closely at the handwriting on this drawing from the Britannia Bridge, it's exactly the same as the handwriting for that on the Newcastle High Level Bridge. They are actually being drawn by the same draftsman.
Of course, because these drawings aren't being done by the chief engineer, are they? There's a whole team of people that have supported him and his name in his studio to make these wonderful bits of art.
Yes.
Originally, these two bridges were intended to look even more different.
We have a set of working drawings for the Britannia Bridge. This is the central tower at the Britannia Bridge, and what there is at the top of it is a huge statue of Britannia.
I've never seen that before.
And we hadn't seen it either, Tim. This massive statue of Britannia, never built. Maybe it was a bit too windy for her up there.
But it looks very much like the Britannia statue, of course, they did erect down at London Euston on the far south end of the line.
Maybe they recycled the inspiration.
Who knows?
This bridge burnt down in 1970, and they rebuilt it using Stephenson's masonry to be a road and rail bridge.
I didn't know they'd used that original masonry to kind of be the springboard for the new bridge we know today. So that actually means that you've got now, on this side of the country, his old bridge, train tracks below and the road above, but on the other side of the country, you've got the train tracks above and the road below. That's a wonderful kind of circularity here.
Absolutely. That road and rail combination on either side of the country is still integral to the infrastructure today. It really comes full circle.
These drawings truly are an amazing insight into the mind of one of our greatest civil engineers, whose work still affects how we travel the country today.
Vicky, it's been such a privilege just to come in here and meet you and just scratch the very surface of this awesome, awesome archive.
We're very lucky, and you're very welcome, Tim.
I think I might come back.
For nearly 180 years, Stephenson's bridges have affected the lives of the people who pass over them. Hoping for similar longevity is the striking Birmingham New Street Station. Renovated in 2015 and serves 170,000 passengers daily. But while the face of it is super shiny and ultra-modern, the brains of the local operation are very much the product of a different era. This is Birmingham New Street Signal Box. It might look like it's been beamed in from another time and space, but this remarkable 1960s tower still coordinates every aspect of the 1,200 trains that pass through the UK's second city every day. Writer Chris Greenland likes brutalist architecture like this so very much, he wrote a book on it.
I lived in Birmingham for 5 years, so I saw this building every day when I came into work. We're right in the heart of Birmingham. You can see New Street Station here and all the streets of the city centre. And whenever I was walking through the city on my way to work, I would see this weird brutalist structure and kind of wonder what was inside it. And it made me think a lot about the architecture that was built from that era. And we don't always take notice of these things that are around us every day, but this is really something unique and special in the city.
Built as part of the 60s renovation of New Street Station, the designers had to fit the building into a very small footprint, yet give it enough elevation to still be able to see onto the tracks below. So they built high, and they built bold. The result was a remarkable building which is quite unlike any signal box I've ever come across. And I've seen a few in my time.
When I look at this building, I can't stop thinking about the crinkle-cut chips that my grandma used to make for me when I was a kid. Someone else has likened it to a jack-in-the-box or an accordion, but the thing about it is, it's very striking. And even when you see the wall here, which kind of goes with the building, it all goes together and it all makes it look very unique and very 60s.
Birmingham's brutalist revolution was led by civil engineer Herbert Manzoni, who, during the 1960s, sought to systematically modernise the entire city centre. He promoted designs like the Bullring Shopping Centre and the Central Library Building. Because, as Manzoni believed, future generations will be better occupied in applying their thoughts and energies to forging ahead rather than looking backwards.
When they built the signal box in this style, it was really saying something about Birmingham in the 60s. The city was changing at such a rapid pace. They wanted to make the most futuristic city in the UK. And I think that's what they did, really. Their motto was forward. They weren't really interested in history or what went before. They just wanted to look towards the future.
Here's a fun fact for you. Brutalist architecture isn't actually named for its somewhat brutal appearance. Its origins lie in béton brut, the French for raw concrete. Famous examples include the National Theatre, which revels in its exposed building materials, and London's Barbican Estate, where I lived for many happy years.
Some of the things that mark the signal box out as a typical example of brutalist architecture are the things like the exposed concrete. There's an honesty and an authenticity to it. That's what brutalism was about. It was about saying, this is what I am as a building, right? You can see what it's made of. You can see how it functions. It's true to its materials and true to its form. And a lot of architecture you see these days is kind of lying to you. You have the concrete shell still, but people come along and they put different cladding on it. Whereas brutalism is about authenticity.
Bold, blocky and uncompromising, the building was designed so that no two sides look the same. As the sun moves around the building, the corrugated concrete panelling casts a myriad of shadow patterns. And the thin strip of sunken steel-framed window reveals little of the important work within. I know brutalism may not be to everyone's taste, but I love this wonderful example of a type of architecture which has more or less been erased from this city's landscape.
Birmingham's lost a lot of these buildings in recent times. They've all been demolished. The Central Library has been demolished. So Birmingham's kind of reinvented itself. But it makes me think of when you have a divorce or something, you then think about what you've lost. And the city's starting to think, well, maybe these things weren't so bad that were built in the 60s, and there's a newfound enthusiasm for them. I think the city's kind of rediscovering a love for those 60s buildings.
Sadly, operations currently within the signal box will soon be shut down and moved to the modern West Midlands Signalling Centre. But thankfully, this building is here to stay, because in 1995 it was given a Grade 2 listing as one of Britain's best modern structures. But before the signalling equipment is mothballed, we'll be lucky enough to have one last look inside to see what secrets it reveals. Positioned right in the heart of the city, the wonderful Birmingham New Street Signal Box is one of the most striking train control centres in the world. Since playing signalman with my own model train sets, I've always dreamed of a look inside. Thankfully, Operations Manager John Corbs is going to give us a privileged peek at its inner workings.
Right, we're now on level 6, which is the operating floor of Birmingham New Street Power Signal Box. If you look out the window there, you've got a pretty good view of the station, which is quite futuristic looking.
For any one of us who's ever felt the joy of a model train set, the inside of this room is heaven. The lights are kept dimmed to help the operators concentrate, but it's rather like stepping on board a 1960s sci-fi spaceship. From this mesmerising array of buttons, lights and switches, dedicated signal workers manage the 12 platforms and 1,200 trains which run through the busiest station in Britain outside of London.
By its very nature, a very complex and demanding job. The signaller is always having to make decisions. It's a very hands-on and manual role in that you're pushing buttons and pulling buttons. Very old school.
It's amazing to think that since 1964, this room and much of the tech that runs the station have hardly changed.
It works. It still works after many, many years, 50-plus years of moving thousands and thousands of trains since it's been commissioned, and it does to this day. So a testament to the quality of the engineers who put it in, commissioned it and maintain it now.
All of these signal operations are to be switched over to a centralised digital system. So we're very lucky indeed to see this in action for one final time.
It's a privilege because it's a bit of a blast from the past up here, isn't it? And it's going to be replaced by new technology, and you won't see this again.
This wall is a joyous example of analog technology. But if you think it's all secretly powered by a microprocessor, think again.
So the first thing, or things that hit you when you walk in this room, is the noise and the smell. It's like being at a fun fair, the old electrical equipment smell. It's very 1960s.
Taking up a whole floor of the building, this is the incredible relay room of Birmingham New Street. If upstairs is the brains, then this room is the central nervous system.
This equipment works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's never been turned off.
This was once cutting-edge tech. It's incredible to hear the wonderful clicking from these banks upon banks of relays as they transfer instructions from signallers upstairs to trains below. It's almost like railway poetry in motion.
I like coming in this room because if you hit with the smells and the noises, it makes it feel as if it's alive, and how it's, may sound a bit strange, but how it's operating the signalling equipment. So I think it'll be a sad day when it's turned off, but we understand how technology moves on and we need to do that.
Luckily, there's enough time for John to enjoy a few more visits to his favourite part of the building.
One of the perks of the job is being able to stand in the centre of Birmingham and watch trains go by, which is quite unusual in this day and age of our new signalling locations, in that you don't see trains going by where you're working. So, yeah, I enjoy that.
But even after so many years working here, he's still not quite sold on the architectural style.
The building itself, I've worked here many years, I've got used to it. That is the way it looks. It's obviously a brutalist architecture structure. And there are quite a few fans of that genre. I've got used to it and I've got to like it at times, and other times you look at it and it's really ugly. But it's one of the standout buildings in the city centre.
Sure, this style of architecture isn't loved by all. But I do hope we can all agree it's a good thing that this wonderful building is protected and that it finds a new life within the very forward-thinking city that surrounds it. Whilst the 60s architecture that helped shape Birmingham is being preserved, back in Lincoln, they're still dealing with the effects of Victorian railway planning. Architect Nigel Stevenson is responsible for 2 striking footbridges built to deal with the fallout from multiple railways running through this city. But the level crossing chaos isn't the only railway legacy that modern architecture has sought to solve.
This was one of the only remaining structures from the old Eastham rail yard that once sat on this site. So it was very important to ourselves to actually restore this building and brought it back to life for a modern university campus.
Well, tell me, it says here Great Central Library Warehouse, but which is it?
It actually used to be Great Central Goods and Grain Warehouse. However, when it was converted to a library, the university were very keen to make an announcement for its next stage of its life.
It was initially built as part of the expansion of yet another railway into the area, the Great Central, and played a significant role, with goods wagons being shunted into the building to load and unload. As goods traffic moved to the roads, though, the warehouse lost its purpose, and by 1998, it was derelict. But that was before Nigel and his team got their hands on it.
So what have you changed on the outside?
It was very important to us that any additions that we wanted to put onto this building had to take reference historically. For example, the 3 monolithic elements there, they represent the old loading bays that used to bring the goods up from the canal into the rail. And equally, the cantilevered glass box.
Yes.
That's where there used to be a second-floor entry point. So we were just reinstating something, but in a modern way.
I guess you can't put back a pastiche of the past, can you, really?
Exactly, because we were building a university for the future. But the old building, for me, is still star of the show.
You're absolutely correct.
This is what warms the cockles of my heart, to see the life breathe back into this once derelict building. And there's more. Because I've heard there's a hidden piece of railway treasure buried within its walls.
I'm seeing something rather strange on the end of the trusses.
Yes. Well, there is a good story behind that. When the building was actually being constructed from 1905 to 1907, during quite a major steel strike at the time, they eventually run out of steel. So the only thing that they could get their hands on was old railway track, and they bent that to form the old supports for the old Queen's trusses.
So it's literally railway architecture.
Literally, yes. Everything that we found in the building that was historic, we made a conscious effort to restore it and bring it back to its former glory.
Thank you so much for preserving this wonderful bit of architecture for so many of us to enjoy in the future.
Yeah, it's a very important building to us. It's a very rewarding project.
How wonderful that this building, once a repository for rail-transported grain, is now a repository of knowledge, inside and out. I had no idea until I came here just how much the city of Lincoln had been separated by the railways that were once supposed to connect it.
But ironically, it's railway architecture that's come to the rescue. Firstly, on the university campus, old buildings are reinvigorated and renewed and now become part of the heart of university life. And over here, behind me, on these railway tracks, there have been bridges built across them, uniting the two halves of the city and making it one whole place once again.
Next time, I'll be investigating Brunel's Great Folly by the seaside.
And that's what's so wonderful about this. It shows what Victorian railway architecture was all about.
And we'll revisit a former wreck getting a new lease of life.
Oh, look at that!
Another diagonal one.
Another diagonal. Wow.